For our second panel tonight, we have two presenters ready to share with us their insights into the market. After the presentations, we'll open the floor up again to your questions, and for those of you online, just note your question in the chat room on the screen. Our first presenter tonight is Eric Bond. Eric is CMHC's Principal Market Analyst and Salesperson for Metro Vancouver and the Fraser Valley. He provides commentary on new home construction, resale, and rental market developments and their impact on the housing market. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Chemistry and Economics from Dalhousie University and a Master of Arts in Economics from the University of British Columbia. So please join me in welcoming Eric.
Found the magic button here. This is good. So good evening. It is a pleasure to be here tonight, and I'd like to thank the Greater Vancouver Home Builders Association for the opportunity to present. It's great to see many of you here as well, and online to learn more about buying a home, which is certainly both a exciting and a challenging decision. You have the stress of finding the right home and the right location, financing the home, the time to look for the home, and an added pressure in this market, which is a strong seller's market, is competition with other buyers. So this presentation over the next 12 minutes or so will hopefully give you some of the information that you need to understand what is happening in the Vancouver housing market at a high level. So CMHC is Canada's national housing agency, and in addition to providing mortgage insurance to the market, we have a number of resources available to help you with the home buying process. So I will begin my presentation by highlighting some of those tools to you. I'll then go over the resale home market at a high level and take a look at current trends in sales and prices. And now, since the event is being sponsored by the Greater Vancouver Home Builders Association, I will be sure to talk about new home construction as well. But as you'll see, this is a very active area with lots of projects underway. Finally, I will wrap up with a summary of our housing market outlook for Vancouver for the next 2 years. So let's start with some resources to get you underway. So in your loot bags, you will have two home buying step-by-step booklets. The first is a great guide. It says your guide to buying a home in Canada. It will help you through the home buying process from deciding whether becoming a homeowner is right to you, right up to arranging for a home inspection, say prior to finalizing your purchase. The second is a set of workbooks and checklists to help you through this. And I'd like to say there's, fun coloring exercises or this sort of thing, but really this is for crunching the numbers. And it's a great tool that if you need additional copies, these are available on our website as well. There are a couple of other helpful tools on our website, including, as I said, calculators, but this is the online version. And then we have a guide specifically geared towards buyers of condominiums to learn more about condo living and condo governance. On the side of the page there are also a couple of interesting links. If you are new to Canada and looking to buy a home, we've created a separate portal that is available in 8 languages that deals with topics unique to your situation. Lastly, there is also a link to our housing market information portal, and this is a great map-driven tool where you can find all of the CMHC-sourced housing market data I'm about to share with you, as well as our market research reports. So we have data on the rental market if, for example, you want to compare the cost of renting versus home ownership in a given area. And all of this information is freely available to the public, and I hope it will be helpful to you as you explore your housing options. So let's now take an overview of the Vancouver resale home market. And the first observation I'll make is that supply in our market is low. The number of active MLS listings has been trending downwards for the last couple of years due to relatively constant new listings and an increase in demand over the same period. So that means that there has been more competition on the market for those units that are listed. The results vary by housing type, but in general, this has led to multiple offer situations for many sales around the region and increased competition between buyers. Now, if we look at how sales have trended over the same period, you can see how they surged across the board between mid-2014 and mid-2016, growing to a pace that's well above their respective 10-year averages. What's also interesting is that sales of single detached homes and apartment condominiums, which I've shown here in blue and green, generally moved in lockstep over much of the past decade. But then that changed in mid-2016 when sales of single detached homes declined and lost market share to apartments and townhomes. And what I'll propose to you is that this shift in sales is largely due to relative affordability, as prices of single detached homes had reached a breaking point of sorts, after which buyers making a purchase based on their income could no longer participate in that market segment. Instead, such buyers could only afford to purchase an apartment or a townhouse, leading to what I'll call a two-speed resale market, where more affordable homes see stronger demand and more expensive homes see lower demand. And so if you have rising sales in some segments, coupled with an overall decline in the number of available listings that I mentioned earlier, the result is that market conditions have diverged over this period for different property types, but still favor sellers overall. This is another way of illustrating the two-speed market to you, and what I've shown here is the sales to new listings ratio, which is a measure as to whether the market favors buyers, whether it favors sellers, or whether indeed we're seeing a balance between supply and demand. So when the market favors sellers and the ratio is above the shaded area in the middle of the chart, you see strong price growth due to the increased scarcity of homes in the market, which has been the case for the townhouse and apartment segments over the last 2 years. In contrast, the single detached home market has diverged from the other types and is operating at a different speed. And although it's balanced right now, it may well spend some time as a buyer's market if current trends continue. The market conditions and its two speeds can also be used to explain the price movements over the last few years for the Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver area. For single detached homes that have been seeing more balanced conditions that I just mentioned, prices have largely been stable over the last 2 years following that large run-up in 2015. In contrast, the strong sellers conditions we've seen in the apartment and townhouse segments have led to price increases of between $200,000 and $300,000 over the past 2 years, which in percentage terms have been between 35% and 45% on average. You are not likely to see this again over the next 2 years, since once prices move higher, and particularly once they cross that $1 million mark, they basically become out of reach for some of those making a purchase in the market based on their income, particularly in the current interest rate environment where we are expecting to see rising rates in future that will limit people's purchasing power. So this is really why the single detached market, with its average price of $1.7 million, is now largely governed by buyers who bring a significant amount of accumulated wealth to the transaction, whether that's from an existing property or whether that's from outside of the market. So I want to switch gears just a little bit to talk about new home construction, which in many ways responds as a pressure release valve for the resale market. So the higher prices and the strong demand that we've seen in recent years, they have incentivized builders to start many new projects. And in fact, there are now over 40,000 units currently under construction in Greater Vancouver, which is a record high and double the number that were being built at one time, even 5 years ago. In terms of what is being built, the vast majority are apartments, and about 25,000 of those are condos, and the other 8,000 are purpose-built rental apartments. And these are the two segments where demand has been strongest in the market. In the townhouse segment, which in many ways represents the missing middle of the housing market and the aspirational, or the main aspiration of home ownership, given that a single detached home might be out of reach, there are only about 3,000 units under construction, which at least in part I will attribute to the challenges in making the economics of these projects work for developers with regulations and land prices as they are. Now, despite record construction, demand for new homes has been so strong that inventories of completed and unsold homes are at decade lows. The increase in demand, again, began in 2014, and as you can see on the graph, resulted in inventories being drawn down in 2015 and 2016. And really since mid-2016, the supply of new homes has been very low, generally at under 2 months' supply. Supplies have been most constrained for more affordable units, namely condos, while we have seen some expansion over that period in the inventory of single detached homes. I will point out that nearly all of those homes are in the Fraser Valley, where single detached homes are more affordable relative to other parts of the region. So I'm going to wrap up with a summary of our housing market outlook for Vancouver for the next 2 years. I've shown the numbers here at the bottom of the slide for those who are interested, and you can also consult our full housing market outlook report on our website. But what I'm going to focus on for the moment is the story. And in Vancouver, we are expecting to continue to see a market that is governed by strong demand and relatively low supply in 2018 and 2019. Demand for housing will be high due to the strength of the local economy, as well as population growth from migration to the region. And demand will be particularly strong for more affordable areas and housing types, leading to the two-speed market, or the continuation of the two-speed market that I was talking about. Supply is low on both the resale and new home markets, which will support continued price gains in the region, albeit not at the pace that we've seen over the last 2 years. The low supply is encouraging. It is encouraging both for buyers, but also for developers, in that it is encouraging the new development of new homes in the region. And we currently have, as I showed, a record number of new homes under construction to respond to that market demand. We expect that the pace of construction will remain above the 10-year average until such a time that inventories are replenished. So there will be more housing options continually coming onto the market over the next 2 years, as well as the completion of all of the units, or most of them, that will be or that are currently underway. So this concludes the very bird's eye view of the Vancouver housing market I have to share with you this evening. I'd certainly welcome your questions during the discussion periods, and I will be around for a few minutes after this session as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Our next speaker is Scott Brown. Scott is the president and CEO of Fifth Avenue Real Estate Marketing Limited. He oversees project marketing and sales teams responsible for delivering sales success and developer partner satisfaction. Throughout his 29 years of work experience, Scott has formed and led teams that have had set sales records in both North America and Asia. Previously, Scott served as the founding partner and senior vice president of Colliers International's residential project marketing group, working with clients including Adira, Altus Group, Boza Properties, Blexo Development, Century Group, Ernst & Young, HJ Properties, McDonald Development Corporation, Polygon Homes, and Qualico. Scott will be sharing insight on the market, housing products, and trending neighborhoods. Please join me in welcoming Scott.
Good evening, both online and in the room here. It's my pleasure to be here to have a conversation with you about the new multifamily home market in Vancouver. And my sort of talk, when I thought about you and the audience tonight, was 5 things multifamily buyers should know but may be afraid to ask. And hopefully, in the spirit of under-promising and over-delivering, I'll give you about 7 things that I think consumers should know and may be afraid to ask. So, okay. So I notice our font's a little off tonight. There must be something with the PowerPoint, but that's fine. The visuals should be fine. Generally, what I want to do is just give you a quick introduction to our company, talk about where prices are going, talk about pre-sales, but from a buyer's perspective, things you may not know. Product and places, just kind of trends we're seeing, people who's buying, and also finish with a very topical discussion on protecting yourself as a new home buyer. So our work at Fifth Avenue is we've sold about 30,000 homes since 1980 that are new multifamily, so townhomes, condominiums, low-rise. We only focus on new product, and we work with developers from the time they acquire the land, constantly consulting the consumer, looking at consumer trends, recommending alongside the architects and the interior designers the form of homes, the layouts, the plans, the interior designs, designing that whole new product and bringing it to you. We work exclusively for developers, and we work about 60 to 70% of our sales involves you having a buyer's agent, licensed realtor, and about 30 to 40% are people who choose to represent themselves in the transaction. Regardless, we feel we have, even though we represent the developer, we do have a duty of care to the consumer. We're focused in this, we manage research for the entire Metro Vancouver market, but our concentration is the suburban markets, where we're particularly keen to work to continue to offer homes that are attractive at price points that make home ownership more accessible to many. So again, very suburban focused. The way we view our work, sort of a simple term for our business, is we say that we bring people home. Our job is to help bring new homes to the market and bring them to consumers. With that in mind, we understand that something that we do, marketing and sales, is something that you should do for people, not something you should do to them. So it's an act of service, and we try to engineer our whole work to be what we call a buying process, helping it make it easy for you to buy as opposed to a sales process. That process of making it easy can be particularly challenging when we have a limited supply, and therefore we're constantly dealing with people that, while we treat them well and don't make them stand out in line in the rain, it's frustrating when people are disappointed because they can't get the new home they desire, or they have to wait. One thing you might not know is that, when you buy a condominium, you're usually prepared to wait 2 years for construction. Up until about a year ago, if you bought a townhome in most markets in Vancouver, you could move in 3 to 6 months. Now the new townhome demand is so strong that you're like a condominium waiting a year and up to 2 years after you buy your home to actually move into it. We put out a free annual report. Here's something you didn't know. Last year, 17,000 new multifamily homes in Metro Vancouver sold. So those are townhomes, condominiums, etc. High-rise, wood frame. Those 17,000, a handful were recorded on MLS. New home sales are not tracked on MLS. Developers don't put all their inventory on MLS. So we create a report for the industry, which includes the consumer, that tracks by neighborhood what's happening with new family home sales. Active sales range, how much did prices go up, down, how many units sold, how many new projects, what's coming. All of you have access to that in a very transparent way and probably don't know that. And if you want to get it, and when you're out shopping for new homes, feel free to go to our website, register. You'll get it once a quarter for free. Okay? The only other people that do that in the industry, well, one of them is the gentleman here in CMHC. They do track that as well. So again, the aim tonight is to have some meaningful conversation. Pretty hard to have meaningful conversation about new homes without talking about prices. In 2010, when we started writing that research report that I mentioned earlier, I remember talking about downtown condominium prices going to $1,000 a square foot, and I got laughed at. Today I get laughed at because it's at $2,000. So the rapid appreciation in Vancouver has been shocking. But what you will notice with some of these charts is up until really only the last year, the suburban market pricing, the product had been absorbing more quickly, but the actual price points in the suburbs had not appreciated. But in the last year, and it doesn't look at as much on these bottom graphs where you see the overall median sales price of condominiums and housing compared to the others, that is a meaningful move in the bottom, and expect that to continue. For instance, in Surrey City Centre, 2 or 3 years ago, you could get a premium specification, 40th floor, high-rise, right by City Hall, brand new, for about $500 a square foot. That's now $900 a square foot, right? So it's just, and in Langley, in the last 6 months alone, condominiums have gone up $100 a square foot on average. So there are more and more people migrating to the east for affordability, and therefore and also at the same time, developers are facing increasingly more and more challenges to developing. The time to approval, costs with respect to land. Construction costs have escalated $35 to $50 a square foot in the last year. So the problem is none of us like the fact that anytime there's these increased costs, land acquisition, construction, delayed in approvals from municipalities, everybody just thinks it can be passed on to you, but at some point that has to stop. It can't go to you. And our concern is if you stop buying because there's not enough supply and we're not getting the product to you at an affordable cost, that's going to have a negative effect and watch resale spike in prices and watch rents go up as well, which is another challenge. It seems like every time we try to attack something from a strategic perspective with respect to affordability, we have these unintended consequences that actually wind up making it worse. So one of the things that you can all do that you may not know, number two things that you may be afraid to ask is, too many people in your neighborhoods, a small number of them, are actually preventing supply. If you want to get more new home supply and keep prices down or more reasonable, you have to get active with your city councils. You have an influence. You can make a huge difference. You can make it okay for projects to be approved that you want in your neighborhood. But if you sit quietly and say, oh, I like that, but I won't go speak to a councillor or do something like that, that small voice is having way too much influence in our market, in our opinion. Okay? Again, just looking at the relative value, though, on this particular slide here, and you can see that prices, up in Vancouver now, $1,700 to $2,200 a square foot for high-rise. You can go out to Abbotsford and get that for $445. Now, everybody laughs and says, well, why would you want to live in Abbotsford? I don't know if you've been out in the suburbs, but it's not your father and mother's suburbs anymore, right? There's a significant amount of placemaking has gone on that has made these places highly attractive. Abbotsford Historic's downtown is a good example. Langley's new town center, right? The Fraser Highway and the LRT is going to change things. Surrey City Center. So a lot of the millennials and some of the retirees that are moving out there are going, this isn't what I thought. It's pedestrian oriented, it's nice. And now they view Vancouver downtown as an amenity I go to once a month, because more and more the job base is shifting to a center of the valley as opposed to being downtown. Do you know that in Abbotsford, for instance, 65% of the people who live in Abbotsford work in Abbotsford? That'd be a nice commute. Not very far if you live out there. Probably similar statistics to Surrey, South Surrey. So what's next in terms of pricing? Things you might be afraid to ask. Get your eye on Mission, get your eye on Chilliwack, and get your eye on Squamish. But some of what's going to surprise you is it's pre-retirement buying. People buying in Chilliwack here, a brand new house for $500,000 or Hope. Now the Chilliwack, those have gone up to $750,000 to $800,000. But there are people moving east who want to stay in this area. Their children are moving east because of affordability. So the children are sliding towards, say, Maple Ridge, and the parents are sliding out to White Rock to sort of be in that same corridor. So Mission, Chilliwack from a value perspective, Abbotsford still from a value perspective, Squamish from a value perspective for the North Shore, and again, very accessible with roads. If there's a place that you want to watch though that I think is a jewel by the ocean that is going to probably double or at least increase by 50%, so if you're a pre-retirement buyer, buy it now, it's White Rock. White Rock's about to go through what happened in West Vancouver and North Vancouver, where they went from $600-700 a square foot to almost, as you can see in here with the North Shore numbers, they went up to $900 to $2,200 a square foot. So a lot of what we talk about is we used to say, if we build it, you will come and buy it. Then we used to say, if we can sell it, we can build it. Now we say, if you don't buy it before we build it, you didn't get it. So why do you need to buy pre-sales? All right? One of the benefits is because generally when you release anything, at recent investment forum, I asked realtors in the room and real estate investors who bought in first stages of multi-phase projects if they'd ever lost money buying a pre-sale in the last 30 years. And there was one hand that went up. So generally you're buying in at the initial prices while a developer needs to get momentum. You're getting some of the best selection. And so there's real value in doing that. Now, the difference is you have to have confidence in the developer, and we legally protect you with that, with disclosure statements and that. But you have to wait for your home. But if you wait until they say they're having their public opening or their grand opening, you may have missed out. So that's one thing. Early buyer benefit, product selection, time. You also have time with pre-sale to buy. to sell, to figure out. A downsizer can wait 2.5 years if they buy a high rise to figure out, when do I sell and am I ready for this lifestyle change? A first-time buyer can take 6 months on a townhome to 12, 18 months and save up more money. So when they move in, they're not house poor or house rich and lifestyle poorer. The other thing that people don't know, though, is how do you get access to it? Most people, there's a lot of realtors out there telling you in the news that, oh, I'm the guy, I'm the special messiah of presale, I can get you into anything. And it used to be that people thought that if you came to a developer and said, I don't have a realtor, will you give me a deal? That was the old myth that you would get a deal. Not true. Developers treat you the same whether you're represented with a realtor or not. That is your choice. But now what they're saying is that if you're a local or an end user and you want to get involved in presale, they're happy to sell it to you. You don't have to go to one of those realtors. They'll get you involved. But what you need to do, and most of the consumers forget to do, is you need to act early. As soon as you see the first, so many of you go online, see something new, register for it, don't answer our pesky salespeople's phone calls, and then when you're finally ready to come into the sales center because it's open, you're mad because it's all gone. We're in a market where there's limited supply. If you act early, developers will get you in to the first selection just like they do the realtor who says he can do it. So that's one thing for you. And don't be afraid to ask them, how do I get involved early? How do I become a VIP? How do I be a family and friend? And I think you're going to find over the next little while, if more of you ask, more of you will get access to that best selection, best pricing. So what's happening in terms of product type? Generally what you're finding is, and we had this discussion before here, is that the single family home for the new generation, for many people because of affordability not in the new generation, they don't care about it. It's not their dream anymore. Their dream is their own home. It doesn't matter if it shares a wall. So we're seeing 1,750 to 2,200 square foot townhomes appealing to both move-up townhome buyers and then also some with master on the main to downs buyers. Because the land that you can afford to do that on is not downtown Vancouver, that's product you're seeing out. Generally, as you move east, you see more ground-orientated product. And no offense, but do we really need a townhome in some, or a high-rise in some of these markets? Because it's risky, costs a lot more money, so the consumer would have to pay more. And not only that, but when you get to certain parts, it's where I grew up in Saskatchewan, and this is a stretched example, but I'll give you an example. In Saskatchewan, where I grew up, it's pretty flat. The view on the 6th floor wasn't much different than the 20th floor. So one thing you do need to know is that prices are going up, and the replacement cost of new product, though, is not going down. So while we may see a flattening of prices for new homes in the next little while, I do not expect a major price reduction in new or in detached the way we'll see it in single family. And the other thing to remember, when you hear the news, you always need to listen, because a lot of times they say Vancouver, and everybody assumes they mean Metro Vancouver when they don't. They mean actually a relatively small but very meaningful part of the overall Metro Vancouver market that is Vancouver proper. So listen, the Greater Vancouver Real Estate Board stats don't cover, right? About 42% of the sales in the market, or at least in new, that's what it represented last year, was 42% of the new product sold was sold in the Fraser Valley. So be aware when you listen to that, what market are they talking about? And are they talking about new or resale? Because detached, and one thing I will say about the media, they've been particularly balanced lately about talking about detached and reminding people, look, the detached market is still very strong. Or the attached market, pardon me. The detached one's struggling. Who's buying? I got to wrap up here. No real changes. We're still going through one of the most significant aging on the population. What we're seeing, though, is a lot of people moving from Vancouver, already pre-retirement buying, into downtown Kelowna before Kelowna's prices go up, and into places like Langford on Vancouver Island. But we're also seeing them move out to Chilliwack and Cultus and places like that. So the downsizers are still a major player. First-time buyers still a major player, but that parental assistance is going to become even more and more important. Number of families moving up. One other little myth that I'm going to bring out here when we're talking about who's buying, okay? The investor's still very active as well, but one other thing you need to realize about who's buying. Not everybody who buys who's Chinese is a foreign buyer, please, okay? We sold 1,200 and some homes last year. We sold a lot of them to Chinese people. Maybe 4, maybe 5 foreign buyers out of 1,200. It may be a bigger deal in Vancouver, but in the suburbs, I don't see it as big of a deal as everybody says. Plus, let's show some respect for people, as opposed to just assuming that they're, evil, wealthy people coming from over to drive up our property values like they were sent here on a mission. I'm a little passionate about that one. Last one, how do we ensure you're protected? There is government protection, the way that we write laws. And the one thing I will say, though, that I'm a little frustrated with the new rules about real estate is that generally the thing to remember is that in any kind of walk of life, there is 5, maybe 10% of the people who are going to try to take advantage of you. Our laws are written to try to protect ourselves from those, but not necessarily to restrict the freedoms of those who don't behave that way. The majority of realtors in this market, overwhelming majority, have their clients in mind, are good people you could work with and you can trust. But there is a small group, and all of this new legislation is targeted at them, but a lot of other people are kind of getting unintendedly, consequence-wise, caught in that. So there is government protection. Read your disclosure statements. Don't be afraid to get a lawyer. There's this news story in New West about a guy saying, well, we're not going to finish costing us much. You all got to come back to 30, 40,000. Look in the legals on that. Right? In most times, if someone did it in there, it says when the consumer's perspective to force the developer to perform to complete the home as per the contract. Realtor representation. It's another way to protect you. Some people choose to do it. Pick a good realtor if you're going to do it, though. And the realtor legally then is involved in the transaction, and you've got someone to go to if you feel that's important. Home warranties. And the last thing is last night, there was a story on the news about a home warranty. It's easy to find 1 or 2 examples, but generally all of our consumers are Greater Vancouver Home Builder members. They build good product, the warranty's there. 2 things you need to know. Just because you bought it doesn't mean you can use it stupid. Okay? There are some people that we know that we've got involved and understood the consumer did things to the home to modify it that actually created issues about leakage. Right? If you want to run an extra cable out for your speaker and you drill through your wall and it drains with water, that's not a warranty issue. That's a careless use of your home issue. So when you get your new home, though, go through the warranties, understand the home, understand your protection, work that warranty hard, but also make sure you understand how to actually maintain your home. That's really important because we don't want to see that. And we have had, over the last couple of years, very little issues, but we have parted ways with a client who we did not feel, as much as we could have made a ton of money with this client selling all his product, we have parted ways because we did not want you caught in those kinds of situations where you're finger pointing and no one was going to fix the home for you. So that whole last point is just that we really do see this multifamily is morphing into a mainstream product type. Don't expect a lot of reasonable sort of drops in prices. And if you want to get our research report, you can leave your business card at the booth. You can go online and register anytime. Feel free to take a look at that data. I hope it's there to help you. That's why we create it. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Some really great advice. We have a few minutes for some questions, comments from the audience. So I open it up to you or those online that might have a question. One back there, Don.
Hi, this question's for Fifth Avenue. I saw in your presentation that you do land acquisitions. Is that correct?
Is this on? Yeah, sorry. That we do land acquisitions?
Yeah, like you help...
we assist all of our existing clients. If they're buying land, we assist with them looking at what's feasible for the product, envisioning, and then actually creating initial revenue models with them. So yeah, we're very involved in land acquisition, and we do help one of our clients to actually buy a site.
Okay, so my question for you is, I've noticed a trend down in the Fraser Valley where the land for buildable product is going north. Do you foresee it flattening out, or is it just going to continue until the profit margins for the developer is not adequate enough?
I think we went through a major leap. I think it's going to adjust. One of the things that I will say something, as much as I'm kind of pro-business, that I think is wrong, is that I think we do have to look to curtail a number of people who are sort of inserting themselves in the way and buying land and flipping it quickly with no intention of developing it, but actually creating inflation for the real developers. Because at some point, the consumer, as I said, can't bear it, and we're just going to see development stop until land prices fall. But when the development stops, we have a big supply issue. That's going to make the stuff that's on the market even more expensive. So I do think we have to look at kind of curtailing some land speculation. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Okay. You mentioned White Rock and South Surrey and whatnot, and a few years back, property prices for land anyway was $3 million an acre.
Yeah.
And now it's at 4.5, I believe, or pushing 5. I mean, where does it end? Does it go until 7 or 8 until?
Well, that's a good question. I saw somebody trying to sell something for 6 the other day. We told our client not to buy, and he didn't. So I think we might be getting there on land prices. But it also depends on how much land you can buy and that. But you can't bear it all the time.
Thank you.
Other comments, questions? One right there.
Hi, this is probably a very naive question, but what happens when you pre-buy? So if you need to wait 2 or 3 years to get the house, do you keep paying the rent and the mortgage, or you start when you move in? So what do you have to do to sign the contract? What do you have to pay when you decide to pre-buy?
Very good question, because I've worked in different countries where you had to pay all the way along. Generally in Vancouver or Metro Vancouver, when you agree to buy the home, you put down maybe like 5%. If it's a high-rise, you might have to go eventually up to 20%, but normally you make one payment, then a little while later you make another payment of about 5%, then you may make one more payment, and then you don't pay anything else during construction, and then when the home completes and it transfers ownership, your mortgage kicks in and away you go. So it's normally somewhere 10 to 20% is normally the amount that someone who buys pre-sale has to put up for a deposit. And then if they're 5% in CMHC, the bank will still recognize those too, because that's a big part of your business, right? Does that answer your question?
Yes.
We have one here.
Hi. Could you talk about if you know really what happened with the new development in New West, the townhouses? I'm not sure if you're aware of which one it is, but it's been in the news, and they're asking for people that have bought 2 years ago to put up more money as a deposit at this time, like another $60K. If not, they have to get out. And why would that happen?
I was kind of alluding to that, and that's why I said that the news story was helpful but not fully helpful, because generally what I can't say is, A, I'm not a lawyer, B, I'd need to see their disclosure statement, because there's a whole statement that where the developer promises certain things to you. So it doesn't sound right. The developer could go back to you and say, hey, this is going to cost me more to build. Would you like to give me $30,000 or $40,000, or I'll give you twice your money back, because he thinks he can sell it for more in the market. And if you do that, that's your choice. But I think they'd really need to look into that. I wish the story followed up and said, well, what is the consumer's right there? Because my belief is, in a normal contract, the consumer could say, sorry, and you need to finish my home. And because that's our contract. And if all the consumers got together and got organized, that would probably put some fear into that developer. Fortunately, these are anomaly stories in our market, but they are disturbing.
But your deposit monies are in fact held in trust?
Yeah, you can. The developer, that's held in trust, right? Developers can use it, but it's protected so that if legally, you get it back.
We got time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions. We have Vanessa, one person online.
So the question is, why did apartment prices rise sharply in the last year but stayed relatively stable in the previous 5 years?
Do you want to go ahead? Go ahead. No, go first.
You might have something to add here too. I think it's really a question of what is the marginal product in the market, and basically what I mean by that is, previously, if you had a certain budget, you could afford a townhouse or even a single detached home. But now that those products are out of reach, a lot more demand has been moving to condos, particularly in the outer suburbs. And so for a given increase in, say, $100,000 of property value, all of a sudden that's a very large percentage amount on something that started from a lower price. So really its demand has been shifting outwards based on what people can afford to buy.
Yeah, so in addition to consumer acceptance of the product type, which you were talking about, I would say that the at least in the Fraser Valley, we joked that in 2007, if the investor was Elvis, he left the building. And the investor has come back selectively and is much more active in the Fraser Valley. And of course, that's another level of demand that does put more pressure on supply. And the main reason though is there's not enough supply, right? That we're not getting products to market as fast as we used to. It's taking up to 2 years to get a townhome project to sale, when it should be 6 months. If we had more supply, everybody says that's not the case. Everybody who knows, generally if there's more supply, prices tend to stay down.
We'll take one last question back there.
Yes, I'd like to know if you go into a pre-sale, are the first-time home owner incentives still applicable?
Which one? The one that canceled today? The deposit assistance program? Is that the one you mean?
Or
RRSP program or anything like that? You know, those kind of things?
In other words, so will a developer accept, like, the only one that I'm aware of, there are some that are unique to specific developments, but in general, the one we see the most in our business is people buying with 5% deposit and a CMHC. And so CMHC is guaranteeing basically to pay the other 5%, correct? Yeah, so that's a deposit assistance program by CMHC. The government program that was helping people with deposits, I guess just as of today, sort of they didn't feel there was enough uptake on it, so it's gone, right, or going shortly.
No, it will end at the end of March. It's the BC Home Program, was administered by BC Housing, and it will terminate at the end of March.
And
We'll still be taking applications up until the end of March. So please join me in thanking Scott and Eric for their really insightful comments. Our next panel is Working with Developers to Rethink Vancouver Real Estate, featuring Michael Garrett, Vice President of Streetside Development, a Qualico company, discussing pre-sales and how to protect yourself, and Bob Sethi, Head of Marketing and Sales for Tien Sur, a group of companies discussing the future of development. That begins in about 5 minutes. Maybe we'll take about 10 minutes so you can stretch your legs and get out to have a look at the market. Again, please fill out your survey so that we can take your comments as we shape future seminars. And again, thanks to our sponsors. So I'll see you back in about 10 minutes.